Thanks, everybody, for tuning into this episode of the Trip Sitting Podcast. Really excited to bring everybody this episode with somebody that I know pretty well. Her name is Hannah Risner. Hannah and I talk a lot about her healing journey, specifically with something called EMDR therapy. We talk about how the central nervous system plays a role in how your body starts reacting to things and how to rewire your brain so you can continue to make the best decisions for yourself as you go on through life. So hope everybody enjoys this episode, and here we go. Thank you for joining me on the Trip Sitting Podcast. So I figured we would kind of start this off just by, I guess, introducing ourselves and talking about how we got to this moment right here, because we've known each other now for, how long? 3 years? Probably 3 years. 3 years, yeah. So I started working with Hannah. We both worked in sales, both work in sales currently. And yeah, that was 3 years ago. And like Hannah had just gotten hired at this company. Like, I think it was like a month before I did. So we were both pretty new together, right?
Yeah, I think it must have been about a month or two apart, I think.
Okay. And you're still there?
I'm still there.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like we found our way back together though.
Yes, we did. So after I left, which was about a year ago, we didn't really talk too much. And then it wasn't until I started doing this blog that I posted something on my actual Instagram just about psychedelic medicine. And Hannah reached out to me and said something like, yes, I'm so glad you said something about this. Like, if you ever do anything in this space or whatever, let me know. I want to be a part of it. And then I was like, well, what do you know? It turns out I already have this blog that I've been doing. And then I sent her the page, and then we started chatting pretty regularly after that.
Yeah. I think you sort of put that up at a time in my life that it was really interesting, because I think I just recently started looking into different, personal healing modalities. Obviously we were at that point, 3 years, 2.5, 3 years deep into the pandemic, the post-pandemic world. And I think I had gotten hit really hard by that change in lifestyle. And so I had just been starting to explore some of the things that you had been talking about, and really interested in healing modalities just to heal myself. So when I saw that, I felt like it was, I really wanted to chat about it with somebody, because there are just so very few places to have intentional conversations about healing and self-exploration, mind exploration. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of was, a twist of fate, I think.
Yeah. No, I just remember being so excited that I'm like, oh my God, fuck yes. Hannah's, I you were literally one of my favorite people to ever work with. And I was excited to be able to have that conversation. We literally talked that night too. I remember like I called you and we talked about it. And one of the things that we talked about, I remember, was you were asking me about microdosing. And I think this was right after I had either just started microdosing for like a month, or it was right after I just finished it. But I remember that being something that you were interested in.
Yeah. And I think you were telling me about you were about to go on the retreat, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. This is definitely before I went to Peru.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was really interested in hearing more about that. And just because, obviously there's so much stigma around it, right? So there are so few people that are willing to have just open conversations about just exploring the topic just in general, much less microdosing itself. So this has always been something that I've thought about and have been interested in and just been researching. And so just to be able to bounce it off of you and hear your experiences was so interesting to me, just because I've been looking into that, healing modality.
Yeah. So tell me, have you started microdosing since that conversation?
No, I have not. Actually, it's really interesting because I recently got into EMDR therapy. And so I've been working on that. Are you familiar with EMDR?
No.
So basically, my story a little bit is that like probably about 6 months ago, I started to run into like having anxiety attacks out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like, you know, in the past that I've always felt like a relatively emotionally healthy person, and that I didn't really like have any, you know, big T traumas or anything like that I really needed to work through. And then randomly out of nowhere, I started to get these like insane panic attacks while driving. And so I knew that I had to reach out to somebody and like check out, see if there was anything I could do to sort of fix this problem, because obviously having a panic attack while driving is a really scary thing when you're driving. Like
probably one of the worst places for that to happen, if I had to
terrifying. Guess. Yes. So I actually started exploring EMDR therapy, and I just, you know, I happened to stumble upon somebody on Reddit who was talking about somebody that they had used in Columbus for EMDR. And I reached out to this therapist, and she was like, we did like a phone screening, and she said, yeah, you know, come in and we'll work on it. So I started exploring that. And I think it's really interesting because it's not like traditional talk therapy. It's actually like a system of like nervous system regulation. So you actually don't even have to talk about like any, you know, anxieties that you've had or any traumas that you've had. If you have like big traumas that you've gone through in your life, you simply like identify memories, and then you use a system of like tapping. Bilateral stimulation is what it's called, where you're stimulating both sides of your brain, either through like hand tappers or eye movements, or you can do this through sound. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of binaural beats. But you can basically do, bilateral brain stimulation while thinking about like distressing memories, even if they're not like, you know, big T traumas, things like assault or whatever.
Super big. Yeah.
I'm just talking about like, you know, the stress of having, you know, a high pressure sales job, or like, you know, a friend breakup, something like that. And basically what it'll allow you to do is it'll allow you to like process these memories in a way that will allow you to move through them and associate stressful memories that put you into a fight or flight response into a like a pattern of like a rest and relax response instead of a fight or flight response in relation to those memories.
Yeah.
So that's a lot. But,
and
yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because like when I think of kind of what psychedelics do, it's really just aiming to do the exact same thing. You're just able to sort of do that, obviously, without taking psychedelics in this type of therapy. Because I mean, when I take psychedelics, let's say that like I just had something similar happen. Like if I just went through a friend breakup, for example, or something like that, you know, I'm going to be sitting there. I'm sad. I'm like, oh shit, I just, you know, lost this friend. You know, I thought we're really close. And then if I were to then take psychedelics right afterwards, typically my mind is going to open up and it's going to allow me to look at the exact same situation, but take a step back and basically rewire the way that I look at that whole experience into typically something more positive, just because there's also a lot of serotonin that's going to be flowing through my brain at the same time. So I'm naturally just going to be feeling happy, but it's just going to help me, again, move past something that normally would have been what I would consider a negative response or just a negative way of thinking about it, and spin it into something more positive, such as like, okay, this one, you know, it was a great friendship while it lasted, and maybe this is something that needed to happen, and you know, this was going to happen eventually, so I'm glad it happened now, or something like that. Regardless of what the response is, it allows me to essentially rewire my brain to think about it in a different way. And it sounds like it's similar to what you were just describing right there.
Yeah, for sure. I think a healing modality like psychedelics, like versus something like EMDR, I feel like they accomplish similar things in different ways, which really I think is to, you know, if you're in a dark room and you have like just a little flashlight, right? And you can just see like a very small portion of the room, but you go and you get a larger flashlight. That's where I feel like psychedelics and things like EMDR, healing modalities like that, can allow you to illuminate a larger space to see a situation for what it is. Even things like meditation and breath work, these things can basically allow you to like to see a situation not just like yourself for what you are, but a situation for what it is. You know what I mean? Like, it's not about just
Mhm.
going inward and shifting your own perspective on yourself, but shifting your
Yeah.
perspective on the things around you as well, and the situations around you, seeing them for what they truly are, rather than, just trying to shift your own perspective, which is an amazing thing. I think we should all be trying to accomplish that all the time, but truly being able to
Yeah.
see things around us for what they are. I think that they accomplish the same thing. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think it does. And it's like, that's such a good point, because it's not what happened that's actually making us sad. It's our attachment to the outcome that's making us actually sad, or making us feel happier, or for, again, whatever situation it is. It's how we perceive it or how we want it to be. And when it doesn't end that way, that's what's going to cause that reaction inside of us. And so, I mean, one of the things that I've been working on is trying to just go through life seeing things for as they are, so I just don't get those attachments. And that's not possible, to go through life without any attachments. If you do that, like, you're probably going to miss a lot. And you might not experience the full joy of moments, but seeing things for as they are and living presently in that moment, and being able to take that step back and just look at something and observe it without judging it, that's what's going to create, I think, like, long lasting happiness, as opposed to just like a single feeling of joy or a single feeling of sadness that's going to come and go, because everything in life just comes and goes. But if you can take that step back, it makes it a lot easier to see things, and with that larger illuminated light, to use your metaphor.
I think, yeah. I mean, I'm terrible at that. I know for me personally, like, I've actually been told straightforward by a number of people in my life that I'm terrible at living in the present moment. And I definitely think that's something. It's such a specific thing for like random people in your life to tell you. So I
Be
feel
like, hey, I don't think you're doing this right.
this is definitely a message that, like, I have not heeded the warning of these strangers throughout my life, but I've been told this by several people. And so I know it's something that I'm working on. But I think in like the larger framework of like how your mind perceives things, and like how like these different tools can basically allow you to organize like situations and thoughts in your life, is like, I think psychedelics can be really important for like essentially creating a filing cabinet for thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can upgrade to like a larger filing cabinet so that you can hold on to, like, you can basically process more things. And then the way I view EMDR specifically, just because I'm so deep in it right now, of like this healing process of EMDR, is it's like, it feels very much like all of these things that have happened over the last like 3 years of the pandemic, and even like all of my experiences in my life previous to that have been like scattered papers on the ground. And I think the goal of EMDR, or what it's allowing me to accomplish, is basically like, I'm picking up all these papers, I'm looking at them, I'm seeing them, I'm not getting rid of them, right? Like, I'm not getting rid of these memories, and I'm not pairing them. I'm just basically organizing them, looking at them, and then filing them away into my file cabinet, so that they're there, but they're organized and they're not cluttering my space.
Got it. And so like, basically, like, they're still there, but you're not feeling the emotions or the weight that they would have had on you if they weren't filed away, if they were still scattered. Those emotions that are from those events are still somewhere in your mind, whereas now it's more so, it's just there, but like the emotional weight that comes along with it, that's what you're able to get rid of.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
correct me if I'm wrong.
No, absolutely. I think there's a lot of evidence that shows that, like, when you go through, even like, I think what most people wouldn't even really consider traumas, but like those things we were talking about before, like just stressful and distressing moments in your life, that your brain processes those in a different way, and your brain can actually get hurt the same way that you could get like a cut on your skin, right? And that if you don't have like the processing tools, especially if these things happen when you're young, and you don't have the tools to really like process difficult emotions, that your brain, can get little scars on it. It can get damaged. And sometimes you have to go back and just like rewind, reprocess those memories, and then reassociate those with something else. can also throw off your nervous system. One of the things that my therapist has been talking a lot about and that I've been digging deeper into is, I don't know, have you ever heard of the polyvagal system?
No.
Okay. So the vagus nerve, I don't know if you know this, is a nerve that connects your brain to your larynx, to your stomach, to your upper and lower GI.
Okay.
And it's a feedback loop. So basically this is how your brain and your organs talk to each other, right? Yeah. And so this is your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. This is fight or flight, and this is like rest and relax.
Okay.
So basically, if you get exposed consistently to enough stressful situations, your vagus nerve is talking to your organs, and like it can actually cause, like anxiety can actually cause things like IBS, you know, like they're connected. So they'll often see like IBS patients with a lot of anxiety. So you can actually like treat and tone your vagus nerve to actually regulate some of those brain body connections. And basically you can retrain your brain and your vagus nerve to sort of calm down and start to sort of get out of the pattern of being in a state of recognizing danger when there is none.
Got it. So like things that happen to you at a younger age when obviously you're still just trying to make sense of the world that would cause that fight or flight reaction, that's going to get stored there. And then so it essentially just gets used to that fight or flight reaction and thinking that that's how it needs to respond to situations where it might not, where it probably shouldn't respond that way, but you're just so conditioned to respond that way that you really can't help it unless you consciously start doing something to go back and rewire how those memories made you feel.
Yeah, you get stuck in sort of a pattern, and it's not even, your fault. This is something that's completely, you can't control it, right? Like your body just gets used to seeing danger when there really isn't any. Not imminent danger, like, a piano's not going to fall on your head, right? But like it gets used to seeing danger. It gets used to recognizing danger. And this is like an amazing thing that is intended to protect you from an evolutionary standpoint. But it can get stuck on sort of like the danger mode, danger zone. And it can really throw you out of balance. And I honestly think for me, like that's what I'm seeing now is that you can basically, by not ever getting a chance to truly process things, stressful anxiety things that happen in your life, you can get thrown into that state and your nervous system is just totally thrown off. So that's what things like EMDR can really do, is allow you to sort of retrain your nervous system to be more consistently tapping into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is calming you down.
That's crazy. How did you, I guess, when you first started doing this, and it sounded like you probably didn't know much about it before you started, like, was it weird doing this just because this is something that, again, I've never heard of? And like, if someone's like, hey, this is how we're going to do this, I'd be like, oh, what the fuck?
It's weird, especially because it's not, it's not talk therapy, right? So when you're getting into it, basically what you're being asked to do is just like think about like a memory. You can start like in one place and then you hold these, like, well, at least what we do is we hold these little tappers and they buzz, right? They buzz on one side or the other. And they don't do anything other than that. You just hold them and then you're just processing this feeling. Essentially what you do is you go into like a meditative breath work exercise while thinking about it. And then you can make like free associations, and you actually don't even need like tools to do this. Like my therapist uses the buzzers, but I've actually seen therapists that will say, all right, let's think about this memory and I'm going to have you watch my hand. And you're going to follow my hand with your eyes. And they just do this. And this can actually achieve bilateral stimulation by basically having you move your eyes back and forth.
Oh, shit.
It's crazy because it's not talk therapy. And there's actually a couple of different techniques in EMDR where you don't even have to think about or talk about the memories at all. I think there's one called like the flash technique, and that involves like a
Mhm.
ton of different things, but you actually don't even have to like enter the risk of re-traumatizing yourself by thinking of traumatic thoughts, things that have happened to you
Yeah.
in your life. So it's a really interesting way of processing this stuff. Yeah, it's very weird.
So with the way that you're doing it, you're thinking about a specific memory and then you're then doing it sort of based on that. I guess I'm curious, has that then turned into, I guess, something deeper as you're like basically understanding, well, why did I process it like this in the first way, in basically the first place? Because for me, I guess when I do psychedelics and it's helped memories like that come up, it's helping me get to the root of the problem, or at least I'm trying to get to the root of the problem. Like that's my whole goal, is being like, basically, to take the most recent example, I hold in a bunch of shame and guilt. I'm trying to figure out, well, why do I hold in a bunch of shame and guilt? Where is that shame and guilt coming from? And trying to like go layers and layers and layers deeper. So is the EMDR trying to accomplish that, or is like, does it basically just not even matter?
Yeah, that's exactly what it does. So typically you'll start thinking about one memory, and then what will generally just tend to happen organically is a different memory will pop up. It's so crazy, just out of nowhere. That's not even the point. It's like, this is always how it goes, at least for me. So I'll be thinking
Yeah.
about something, and then you're not even like supposed to really like try to send it somewhere else. You're just supposed to like meditate on this thought. And then other memories will pop into your mind, or you might process something, you might fully process something. So you might say, okay, I had a lot of anxiety around being organized as a child. And this is just an example because this is not me. I have no problems with but and you
Lucky
might
you.
say, you might think about it for a little while with the buzzers in your hand. You say, all right, like, well, how did I feel in my body when I had that feeling as a kid? You know what I mean? Did I have like a lot of like stomach stuff? Did my stomach hurt a lot? If I think about it now, if I think about that difficult memory now, does it hurt in my stomach? And then your mind will sort of naturally start to go like, well, why did I have that feeling? Was it, something that one of my parents said offhandedly, when I was 6?
Yeah.
And then you'll go there, and then you say, and then you'll be like, your therapist will often ask you like, what does that say about you? Like when you were 6, if you were disorganized, what would that have said about you? Or how would your parent have felt about that? So you'll sort of start to go through these like memory flows, and a lot of them will happen organically with no prompting. And every time I've experienced this, it happens. You can usually get through an entire memory like in 1 hour long session. You can fully break down and process a memory in an hour. It's wild. It's not that way for everybody, right? Like, I mean, I think more difficult, complex emotions, things like PTSD. I know EMDR is used a lot for PTSD. But I think that the statistic that I've read is that typically about 6-hour-long sessions are enough to break down a single PTSD memory for people, which is absolutely insane.
Yeah, I mean, essentially 6-hour-long sessions. That's just like one ayahuasca session, basically.
Yeah, right? Or more like, well, I mean, yeah. How long was an ayahuasca trip for you?
About 4 to 6 hours. I mean, that's how long like a mushroom trip would be as well. And I know psilocybin's being very actively researched to treat PTSD, anxiety, depression, a lot of those neurological health issues that people have.
So, like an ayahuasca trip with a lot less shitting.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds really pleasant. Knowing some of the literal shit that I went through during that experience. That's so interesting that this is also something that I mean, I feel like if I were to go take a survey out there, being really generous, maybe 3% of people would even have heard of EMDR therapy.
Yeah, I definitely have never. I don't know of anybody in my life that has pursued EMDR, but I think that there are a lot of people who could really benefit from it. And like
Yeah.
I was saying earlier, like I definitely I think that there's a lot of there's a lot to unpack in just this statement alone, but I'm going to say it because I think it's relevant to like my journey. Is that I have always felt like a very well adjusted and emotionally healthy person. So
Yeah.
whatever that means.
Same.
It doesn't mean
Same.
anything. But whatever that means.
For the most part, I would definitely agree with that statement. And then it's not until something happens or I discover something else that I'm like, oh shit, no, I wasn't.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's definitely nothing like going through therapy to make you realize how many
Mhm.
of like, seemingly normal things that you do are not are like attached to probably unhealthy coping mechanisms. And so, yeah, for me, it was just like the contrast of feeling healthy and feeling well
Mhm.
adjusted, and then suddenly, like literally suddenly one day, not being emotionally
Yeah.
healthy and well adjusted, that made me
Like your body just reaches a point where
yeah,
it's stored all of that up, and then you just get right over that little tipping point and you realize, oh shit, you got to do something. Because I mean, your body is really good at storing information. I mean, especially if you've been through, I mean, everybody's been through something traumatic, everybody in their entire life. There's no point in like comparing traumas, because it's all about how you end up processing it at the moment. So even if it's something that's seemingly small to somebody else, if you process it as something that is fight or flight for you, you're still feeling that fight or flight response to it, regardless of whether you should have or not. Again, most people probably wouldn't in those scenarios, but if you've been conditioned to do that, it's just as traumatic as any other quote unquote big traumas that people would also have.
yeah, perception is 100% the factor. So I think that there are a lot of people who don't necessarily feel like they have therapy worthy problems.
Yeah.
But this is where I think like something like EMDR and psychedelics, all of these things are, I think, important things to explore, even if you don't necessarily feel that way. Because I think there's, I mean, human life is messy. There's a lot to unpack, regardless of whether you had a big T trauma, as I like to call it, or not. So yeah, it's cool. It's cool to be able to go into your own mind and also realize that like a lot of the best types of healing are healing where you just go within. Like you don't need anything. You don't have to take anything. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to subscribe to anything. It's just about going inward and sort of, making tiny little shifts.
Yeah.
To understand, what your brain is doing, how your brain is putting thoughts together, memories together, to get well. It's been huge for me. I feel a lot better. I'm definitely getting there. I definitely still have stuff I'm working through, but it's been pretty life-changing for me.
I don't think anybody ever reaches a stage in which there's nothing that they're going to have to work on. Like self-healing is a lifelong journey. There's no end to it, but you get better. And that's what self-healing is about just getting better at processing life as it comes to you and not letting it affect you on such a large scale that it might have before. And I think that's what healing's for. I mean, I obviously love being able to go inward and figuring out why I think the way that I think. And then once I think that way, okay, how can I change how I think when that former memory came up? And then so when future patterns happen again, I don't react in the same way. And that's being able to take that step back, like what we were talking about at the beginning, and seeing the bigger picture. Going, like, you have to go back first in order to get that clarity on it and see the bigger picture. If you were to just start right now, it's hard to just be like, okay, I'm going to zoom out. You have to be able to go back so those patterns don't repeat itself. Because I believe that if somebody goes through life without ever going on that inward journey and trying to do these things that would help them or heal them in some way, the same patterns are going to keep happening. That's just how life works, because our brains are like big computers and they want to be as efficient as possible. And so as things happen, they put it into one vault over here, and they say, okay, when something similar happens, this is how we're going to think about it. And then when something else happens, they're like, okay, this is how we're going to think about it. And as you go through life, it's trying to find confirmation bias to continue to think in those same ways, because that's what's most efficient. So you're not taking in every single little sensory thing that's coming in at once. You're able to just be efficient, process it in the same way, and then move on. But a lot of the ways that we've processed things as we grow up can be processed differently in a way that can help us now.
It's evolve or repeat, I think.
Yeah, I like that. Evolve or repeat.
So have you processed like the guilt and shame thing more since you've been back from the retreat? I'm curious to hear sort of how that has how you've marinated on that.
So yes, absolutely. So what I'll say about this, and I wrote about it in one of my blog posts too, at least some of the shame and guilt that's come up. But so when I was doing the ceremony, and that was the second ceremony when a lot of that shame and guilt came up, it was just telling me that, hey, there is all of this shame and guilt inside of you. And it's there, and it's sitting there. And unless you let it out in some way, it's going to continue to sit there, and it's going to continue to subconsciously dictate how you make decisions. But it didn't tell me anything more than that. Like, there was no specific traumas that came up, no specific events. It was just being like, yo, man, there's a lot of shame and guilt. It's up to you now. And that's now the integration process since I've been back, is marinating on that shame and guilt and just sitting there and thinking about memories and events that have caused me to feel shame and guilt, to get to why I do that in the first place, and how I can, rewire that part of my brain that makes me feel all of that shame and guilt to begin with, and then also just keep it inside of me. And so one of the things that I was able to do, and this is all based on this exercise that they told us to do while we were there. So I'm going to talk about that first, actually, because I think this is a really, really useful exercise that people can do. And it's a 15-minute writing exercise where you just basically think about any memory that caused you pain, that caused you shame, that caused you guilt, that caused any sort of what you would label as like a negative response. And you just write about it in as much detail as possible. You don't think about why you felt that way. You don't think about how things happened or how it could have been differently. All you do is just write about a specific event that caused an emotional response for 15 minutes. And then when that 15 minutes is up, you tear that page out and then you burn it. And that is the act of basically letting that go, letting those emotions and everything that you felt in that way go. And there's bigger things in which you might have to write about it more than once. That's currently something that I'm working on right now, is that I've been writing this very, very long portion of my life that I've realized I've still been storing inside of me. And it's taken so far 3 15-minute sessions, and I'm not even through. I'm like maybe halfway through the memory right now. But if you like sit on it for too long, that it gets kind of difficult. Just because your mind goes elsewhere, and it's hard to sit with painful emotions for a really long time and write about it. But once you do that for smaller ones, you keep basically just doing it day by day, day by day. I maybe do it every other day, every 3 days. I'm not perfect. But as you continue to do that, it'll start revealing other patterns. So what happened with me was I was doing that exercise on a memory that dealt with a time that my dad was yelling at me and my brothers for seemingly no reason. And I remember feeling so bad in that moment. And then as I was writing it, just this other memory just popped into my head, having to do with my dad, but like way, way, way deeper than that. Like so goddamn deep. And it had to do with, I could just say this if you don't want to read the post, which I very much understand if most people don't.
No, I'm going to read the post.
It had to do with the fact that like, it had to do with the fact that when I was younger, you know, the way that I felt about my dad was like, I genuinely like thought that my life would be better off like if he were to die. And I was in just such a state emotionally where like I just felt so helpless, and I thought that he was the cause of that. And it was just the way that I was processing those emotions, and like I wanted him to die, and there was a lot of shame and guilt that I felt because of that, because that's a terrible fucking thought, is wishing that your dad were dead. And so then I would catch myself thinking that and be like, that's a terrible thought. You should feel guilty for thinking this. And it was then a never ending cycle of my dad would make me feel shitty. I'd be like, fuck you. I wish you were dead. I'm going to process that into shame and guilt. And now I'm going to store this inside of me for the rest of my entire life until I can finally figure out how to not do that. And that was a huge realization for me, is even coming to that conclusion and remembering that that was something that I used to think, because I didn't even remember that was a thought that crossed my mind beforehand. I had shoved that like so deep down inside of me that I didn't want to think that that was something that I could ever even wish. And that, like, coming to terms with that and then letting it go and essentially like giving myself the love in that moment, like thinking back on times where I felt that way, and rather than thinking of shame and guilt, just giving myself love, because I felt just so unloved in those moments and I couldn't love myself. Doing that was just a very emotional journey, and it's also not done. I'm still even processing things from that exact memory of thinking that about my dad. Like, there's still so many other memories that have brought on those same emotions that I still need to go back and forgive myself for. But just knowing at least sort of where to look now in this really long integration process, it's helped me figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, because it requires, I think, connecting and caring with yourself, but not just your present self, your past self.
Yes.
I mean, do you feel like you're able to connect? I mean, do you ever think of it as like, you know, sort of forgiving a past version of you? Like, do you ever think about yourself younger and try to like connect with yourself when you're younger? This is actually something that we do a lot in EMDR, so I think this is really interesting.
That's like all I'm doing is just thinking back to younger versions of me and forgiving myself for not giving myself the love, or not thinking I needed the love in those moments that I felt so down, or like so shitty. And like that's exactly what it is. It's connecting with those younger versions of myself, forgiving myself, and then also letting it go too, which is the biggest thing. Like, realizing that I'm connecting with myself and the memories are still there, but letting go of the emotions that I felt during those times is then what's allowing, I think, that rewiring process to happen, so I don't continue the same patterns.
Yeah, you're just like reframing them. Wow, that's really powerful. I find it really difficult to connect with younger version of myself, but I think it's really important, especially when like you do have some kind of like difficult family system relationship that you're trying to work through, or that's related to somebody else in your family system. And I've been struggling through that connection to like the younger version of myself, where I don't feel like I can connect with the younger version of myself. So, I mean, do you feel like that's come naturally to you? Do you feel like you're pretty good at making that connection and sort of just imagining yourself interacting with younger you and giving that forgiveness?
2 months ago, no. Since I came back from doing ayahuasca, yes. Like, that was such a radical shift for me. And just literally knowing that there is shame and guilt inside of me. Just now knowing that thought and not even knowing where it's coming from. But that's at least, like, it pointed me in the right direction. Like, the medicine doesn't heal you. It just guides you. So now you know where to look. And so now it's easier for me to connect to those younger selves, but it's still not natural. It's honestly really hard to explain. Like, I couldn't even go back and try to imagine how I used to think of things. I think I used to just be so like, but both of us mentioned that we were consider ourselves to be like, you know, pretty normal, happy people, like as it is, and like didn't think we had a lot to work on, right?
Yeah.
And so I was so okay with my current self that I basically just like shoved those past selves deep down inside of me and just pretended like they weren't there and just focused on like my current self. I'm like, fuck yeah, I love who I am right now. This is awesome. I can just keep going like this. And every time I evolve, I just forget about the past self. And like that person wasn't even there. But all of the ways that you process emotions and all of the things that those previous selves did, those get stored inside of the body. Those get stored inside of the brain, along with the way that you handled things and processed emotions during that time period as well. And I was just so good at ignoring it, got really good at just moving on and pretending like it wasn't there. And so now this has opened the doors to realize that these things are still there, and it really does take time. It's not something that's quick at all. And there's like new discoveries that I'm making, even about the exact same thing. It'll come back to me and be like, okay, nope, now you need to reframe this one more time. And then a week will go by and the same memory will come back and I'll be like, okay, now I got to reframe it from when I just reframed it a week ago. And it's that gradual process that you just have to follow. And God, it takes like just so much patience and it's not easy, but it feels so good once you're able to do it. But it's not intuitive at all.
No. I get the sense too that like I don't know if you're like me, but I feel like I use a lot of these things because I want to move forward, because I am truly interested in like, you know, being the healthiest version of myself that I can be mentally. And so I think the goal for me in treating myself is to be able to move forward. But I think one thing that I'm noticing while actively engaging in this healing process is that rather than having a tool that helps me move forward, I feel like I'm getting a tool that is clearing the path for me to go backward so that I can move forward. So it's not forward progress so much as it is just allowing myself to process stuff in the past so that I can you know, cut some of these ties with unhealthy coping mechanisms. It's crazy. It's just insane how the mind works like that. But it's interesting to hear you echo some of that stuff. Yeah.
The way that I look at it is 2 steps backward, 3 steps forward, then 2 steps backward again, then 3 steps forward. But I mean, you got to go backwards. I mean, it's going to feel like you're not making any progress at all. Like things are going to get more confusing at the beginning, and it's going to be hard, and you're probably going to want to give up. I know I certainly have gone through points where, I mean, I'm feeling burnt out, and as you go through this and like you start to feel that, then reminding myself like, okay, no, like it's okay to just take a break and just chill. This doesn't need to be your whole life. It needs to be, again, something that you're slowly, constantly progressing at and getting better at. But you know, you got to make time in your life to make mistakes. Fuck. I mean, nobody's ever going to go through life being perfect. And that was also, again, something that I realized from all that shame and guilt is like, I'm trying to be this perfect person that knows everything and does everything and responds perfectly and knows exactly what to say and think at all times. And like, that doesn't exist. There's not a single person in human history that is perfect. And it's so easy for me to forgive other people for not being perfect, but it was so hard for me to forgive myself.
It's heavy. It's true. It's a lot easier if it can feel that way sometimes. But I think that for me, like I didn't make that connection until I really started going deep into therapy and realizing, wow, like I'm way, way harder on myself than I am anyone else. And
Yeah.
that's
I
tough.
think a lot of people are like that too. I don't think that that's out of the ordinary at all. I think that's a really relatable thing. And I don't know why we do that when we're kids, think that we need to be so hard on ourselves for whatever reason, but that can have negative consequences as you continue to go through life if you continue to do that and don't forgive yourself and just treat yourself with grace. Like hold yourself to a standard of grace, not perfection. I saw that quote somewhere on Instagram and it's beautiful.
It's compassion.
Yeah. So I do also want to talk to you about psychedelics because I know that you have also done psychedelics, at least mushrooms, correct?
Yeah, microdosing.
Okay, got it. So do you, I guess, have you done that with the intentions of helping you, I guess, like with the anxiety, or was it just something you did like once or twice just to try it? Or I mean, basically sort of, I guess now that you've been doing this EMDR, yeah, what's it like?
Yeah, no, because the anxiety is so new for me that it's never been something that like that I used to treat anxiety, but I know that you have a little bit more experience with using that. What's your experience with that been? I mean, do you feel like that's beneficial for anxiety, or do you think that's like a little bit more beneficial for sort of expanding your mind to be able to process things when you're not tripping?
To be honest, I don't have a fully formed opinion on it because when I did it, it was during a time where I didn't really feel like I had any sort of anxiety. So like I was doing it with the intention to be more creative and just experience more joy in the day. And I think it did accomplish that, but I don't know if it helped me accomplish that more so than the fact that I was simply just making that intention every day to just be more creative and have more joy in the day. Because I think that, I mean, the mind is so powerful that that's why the placebo effect exists in the first place, because you can literally trick your mind into responding differently just by telling your mind to do something. And so I don't know if it was really the mushrooms that were doing it and I was just taking like 100 milligrams every third day, or if it was actually just me just telling myself, hey, just be more creative and just have more fun in the day.
Oh, so you every third day?
Yeah, so
You're
like
doing
one,
this?
so like you take it one day, yeah, take it one day and then you're off 2 days, and then you take it the next day and then you're off for 2 days. So you're just taking it every third day. That was how I did it. I know there's other protocols that people follow.
And you were like fully tripping, or this was a microdose?
Oh, this was microdosing. Sorry if that wasn't clear.
Okay, I was like, wait, you're fully tripping every 3 days?
That
Cam,
would
are
be
you
insane.
okay?
that would be cause to that would be cause to start getting a little bit worried. But yeah, no, that was just with microdosing. There was a time in my life though where I was probably taking like a full dose of LSD, probably close to every weekend for like maybe 6 to 8 weeks, and that was a lot. It was also during college, which I didn't have a lot of personal responsibilities at the time. So I was so carefree, but it was also such a interesting moment in my life too, because I look back on it and like the amount of healing almost on accident that I did was like incredible. Like there was such a shift in how I viewed life and how I interacted with people, and just some old small little things that I would be able to reframe on, like, why do I get mad all the time at little things? I was able to just like change those wirings in my brain and basically rewired them. And all while I was taking LSD every single weekend to like go fuck around and have fun. I was never taking it with the intention to heal myself or like fix any of those things. This was before I even knew that psychedelics had the potential to do that. It was just a byproduct that happened on accident. And I'm also not recommending anybody else ever do that. Let me be clear. But
like,
this was my personal experience that this happened to happen. And I know there are other people where they have taken LSD or taken another psychedelic substance and did not have any of the same positive experiences.
sort of a glass of orange juice situation. Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
I think it varies like so much person to person. I mean, your physical biology, like, well, set and setting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean that matters so much, and not just for psychedelics, for anything really, right? Like, set and setting matters a whole lot. But it's interesting that sort of the healing on accident part of that is really interesting.
Yeah, it's funny looking back on it and now seeing all of these dots connect as I've started to go through life and then go deeper in this more intentional healing journey, putting together some of the dots that, you know, I was doing, like knowing that I needed to do this before I would admit that I needed to do this, or before I could consciously know that this was something that I wanted to do. I was still trying to do it and trying to get those positive effects from it. I just didn't understand why or how at the time.
That's especially like thinking about it, playing with such a powerful tool that we now view as a powerful tool. But back then it's just like, let's do this and go out on the town.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
For sure. So I guess what's next for you, Hannah? I guess what are you looking forward to? What are you focusing on right now? Whether it's healing related, whether it's just like your fucking life, like what the fuck's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to continuing to sort of deep dive into some of this stuff. I mean, I think the goal for me is to get a sense of creativity and playfulness back. I think I've spent such a long period of my life, the last like 3 to 5 years, just kind of like going inward, you know, sacrificing, trying to, you know, do good work and hard work. And I think I'm at a stage in my life where I'm trying to optimize as much as possible to feel pleasure and joy. And that's kind of where my head's at.
Yeah.
And I think I'm getting there. I think I'm going in that direction. I think that these different healing things that I'm trying out, that I'm working on, I think are going to get me there. But like, yeah, I'm trying to maximize my creativity and joy, because I just, I'm at a stage in my life where, you know, that's the most important thing to me.
Can you tap into, or I guess remember, like other moments in your life where like you're like, I had that creativity and joy at one point, and then you're like, okay, what the fuck happened? Or is it trying to get like this new sense of creativity and joy that like you don't even necessarily know what it looks like?
I have a feeling, like I've definitely been in times in my life where I felt really creative, really joyful. I think my life, like probably post college, was probably where I felt the most of this. But I get the sense that it's going to look a lot different. I get like a strong sense that it's going to look a lot different. And I really feel like, I think the way that I accomplish and achieve this is by like making friends with myself again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think it's all there, it's all inside, and so I'm trying to tap into that. But yes, I feel like it looks different. I feel like the future of it looks different.
Yeah, being friends with yourself, that's so overlooked. I think that's something that we don't really think about too much, and like everybody, you know, has those days where they're like, oh, like self-care, like, you know, maybe, I don't know, go to the spa, like go get a nice dinner or something like that. But you almost don't understand like why you're doing it. And like you're, you know, like you might not be really connecting with yourself in those moments. Like, you know, that these are things that, you know, I guess kind of make you feel good, but I think being really friends with yourself and like being truly comfortable with yourself goes even deeper than that.
I agree. We're getting there.
We're getting there. That's what this whole journey is about. And you can have a lot of fun along the way. And that right now is a big focus for me, is remembering to have fun and like experience joy and laughter in all of these present moments that we have. And then also a big thing for me too has been having more conversations and like connecting with like close friends that I can talk about this shit with, you included, which I am incredibly, incredibly thankful for. So I want to thank you so much for being my friends, and I'm just excited to be able to be there for you when you need me to, and just watch you grow.
Likewise, I want to thank you for being my friend. I think that Cam, I think there are so few places where people get to sort of like come together and talk about things like this. And I think that I have a lot of thoughts, which I'll get into offline, about how important like intentional spaces for talking about like philosophical thought and theory and healing and all this stuff. There are so few of those. And so it gives me so much energy to be able to meet in spaces like this and talk about this stuff and wrestle with this stuff. So I appreciate you including me on it. It gives me a lot of energy.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Trip Sitting Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share this with a friend, and please hit the follow button on whichever medium that you are using to consume this content. I very much appreciate it. And if you have any questions or ever just want to get in contact with me, feel free to shoot me an email at tripsittingblog@gmail.com, or just shoot me a DM on Instagram. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.